Good morning. It's Friday the 30th of October and it's time for Boris's Best of British Bulletin with me, DaviePHD. Well, it's been a bumper week for Tory bellendry, but so was last week and the week before. If anybody wants to pay for me to go somewhere comparatively sane and relaxing for a week, I'm up for it. I hear Mogadishu's quite nice. Previously, the government campaigned for Brexit so that we can look after our own, and then last week they voted not to. Instead, they opted to let up to 900,000 children go hungry during school holidays, including Christmas. In July, when the government lifted the original lockdown, Rishi Sunak, the nicest Tory, tweeted, "I can't wait to get back to the pub." This week, he voted to let thousands of kids starve, and as a result, was barred for life from his local pub. Ben Bradley, a Tory MP and Al Murray Tribute Act, spent last week appealing for justice and opportunity for working class white boys who have been left behind. He then voted to deprive them of food. Then this stout defender of the working class said food vouchers for poor kids will just end up being used in brothels and crack dens. He said he knows kids living in these conditions, and yet, like a true humanitarian, he appears to have done absolutely fuck all about it. He also overlooks the fact that vouchers can only be used to buy food, and I've yet to find evidence that crack dens commonly set up a tuck shop. He then invited his critics to visit one of the country's most deprived schools, whose head agrees with me. The school's governors replied to say neither they nor the head agreed with him. It's Friday just now, and most experts estimate that by Sunday afternoon, Ben Bradley will have dug himself a hole deep enough to see kangaroos. Tory MP Gary Sambrook said it was okay for kids to go hungry during holidays because they have been fed during term time with free school meals. It came as a shock to Sambrook to discover that humans require food on a more regular basis. Tory peer Baroness Barron went on radio and said Tories had done other things to help poor children, such as extra money for emergency universal credit. So the government announced it was reducing emergency universal credit by £20 a week. Upon hearing that local businesses in her constituency wanted to plug the holiday hunger gap, Tory MP Selene Saxby said she was delighted that local businesses in her constituency had bounced back so much after lockdown that they were able to give away food for free, and that she very much hoped they will not seek any further government support. Selene Saxby also consistently votes against measures to reduce tax avoidance, because avoiding tax is the sort of government support she's okay with. McDonald's offered 1 million free school meals over half-term holidays, proving to Boris Johnson that it is possible for clowns to make moral decisions. Morrison's, Co-op, Asda, Manchester United, to name but a few, all generally ruthless capitalist organisations, are among the many to step in where the UK government has stepped back. At a Downing Street press conference, the government repeatedly declined invitations from the media to praise businesses providing meals to hungry children. Matt Hancock said local councils had been provided with a huge amount of extra investment to feed kids. Since 2010, Tories' cuts to local councils have been up to 60%. The Tory council in Ruislip and Uxbridge, which is Boris Johnson's own constituency, joined the campaign to give free school meals to hungry children. Matt Hancock, a sentient teaspoon and ever-dependable master of detail, went on the radio and said there had been lines of communication between Boris Johnson and Marcus Rashford. Marcus Rashford said there hadn't. 2,000 paediatricians condemned the government. The Children's Commissioner said it was like something out of the pages of Oliver Twist. An anonymous Tory MP said it was a political disaster and he'd never known so many Conservative MPs and council leaders be so angry. Senior Tory MP Sir Bernard Jenkins said the government had misunderstood the mood of the country. Tobias Elwood, Tory MP and spine donor, voted with the government but is now openly calling for the policy to change. Multiple Tory MPs have predicted a U-turn, which means at least the government won't have to go hungry over the holidays, because they'll have all those lovely fucking words to eat. And then, because they just don't know when to stop kicking poor children right in the face, the government cut laptop allocation for England's most deprived schools by 80%. In a not at all obvious attempt to distract attention, 112 Tory MPs, 98% of whom had just voted to let children starve at Christmas, wrote to Keir Starmer to complain of the widespread abuse they received as a result of Angela Rayner calling one of them scum. They must have been unable to find a pen and paper when there was a 375% increase in Islamophobic incidents after Boris Johnson referred to Muslim women as letterboxes and bank robbers. They were probably having trouble with a dried up biro when Boris Johnson called gay men bum boys or said black people were pickaninnies with watermelon smiles. Or when he said in Parliament that proven death threats against female Labour MPs were humbug. Perhaps they couldn't find a postage stamp after Home Secretary Priti Patel made an incendiary speech attacking lefty immigration lawyers, one of whom was stabbed 4 days later by a far-right activist. Speaking of which, sorry, did I say which? Well, I fucking meant to. More than 800 lawyers and judges wrote to the government demanding an apology from Priti Patel and saying her rhetoric and hostility risks undermining the rule of law. After demanding local councils build, Michael Gove personally stepped in to oppose them building in his constituency. There's a fine line between spin and outright lies, and that is just one of the many lines Michael Gove has caused to disappear. The government confirmed it was going to start charging 20% VAT on PPE in the middle of a pandemic. The government said it would be fine because care homes can claim back the VAT, but the government's own advice says care homes are unlikely to be able to recover any VAT on PPE. Rishi Sunak said he would provide the NHS with whatever resources it needs to cope with the pandemic, which is why the NHS is £1 billion short of funds needed just to pay wages till the end of the year. Sage said test and trace, the centrepiece of our COVID strategy, was having only a marginal impact. The test and trace system achieved new heroic lows as it revealed 286 million records had been collected and just 104 cases had been pursued in a week. Labour's NHS IT system was once described by the Tories as one of the worst scandals ever in terms of waste of public money, costing £12 billion over 6 years before it worked as it should. By contrast, the Harding-Serco test and trace system has spent £12 billion in just 4 months and failed to meet a single target set for it. Tory MP Bernard Jenkins, who's been quite vocal this week, has called for Baroness Dido fucking Harding to be sacked. Matt Hancock said he had finally published the highly critical 2016 report into the UK's lack of preparedness for a pandemic, which his department had seen and then done fuck all to act upon. Due to some terribly and entirely unpredictable oversight, the version he published was incomplete and heavily redacted, because that's exactly what you'd do if it wasn't massively embarrassing. Only 211 days since South Korea started mandatory test and quarantine at its airport, the UK government announced plans to do the same. Except, unlike South Korea, we'll charge people for the tests. Deaths per million in South Korea? 8. Deaths per million in the UK? 665. It was then reported that bankers and hedge fund managers would be exempt from quarantine, because obviously the virus, a non-living, submicroscopic entity with no brain or nervous system, will figure out how rich you are before deciding whether to infect you and fucking kill you. Boris Johnson held a meeting with UK business leaders and urged them to follow the government's guidance in preparing for Brexit. But the government hasn't agreed a deal, so has not yet issued final guidance for preparing for Brexit. Then it was reported Boris Johnson won't make a decision about whether to accept a Brexit deal until he finds out if Donald Trump has won the US election. Because the most important part of taking back control and standing on your own 2 feet as a proud independent nation is not being able to decide a thing until we find out what Donald fucking Trump is up to. Assuming the US election happens cleanly, and Trump is involved, so who the fuck knows, this leaves businesses just 31 working days to implement a plan for the end of a 41 period of stability in the middle of a pandemic that most believe will be at the peak of its second wave. But in good news, the government announced a deal with Japan that was even better than the one Japan has with the EU. But whoops, the EU-Japan deal prevents either side from offering better terms to anybody else. And our deal with Japan is just 5% of the one we lose with the European Union. The former ambassador to the USA under both Tory and Labour governments said the UK's plans for handling a Joe Biden presidency are profoundly clumsy and stupid, and that Number 10 is absolutely clueless about how to manage a post-Brexit relationship with the USA. Between them, the EU and the USA account for around 60% of the UK's total trade. So deliberately losing one and then accidentally losing another is definitely a reason for us all to be intensely relaxed about the whole fucking thing. Now, where is that ticket to Mogadishu? Folks, thanks for watching. Please remember, this is satire. It is all based on verifiable facts, but it is satire nonetheless. I hope you enjoyed the video. Likes are good, so click that like button. But if you know any unionists, please share it with them. They need to know how tragic their life choices are. Enjoy. DaviePHD.